Hey, beautiful people, this is Aaron the Pedantic, and yes, I'm still kind of ill, so I apologize for the way that I sound, but I still wanted to do this video because I'm really excited about starting my Greyhawk game. It starts next Monday, and I just wanted to talk about it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about me preparing for the Greyhawk game. So for those who don't know, I'm running this in first edition, which honestly is going to be quite a task because I'm going to be running it for people that have played first edition quite extensively in some cases. And in my case, I've never run first edition before, and I've never been a player in first edition. Well, okay, that's not entirely true. I have been a player in first edition, but not for a long-term campaign. I have played second edition, but it is a slightly different animal. But long story short, I'm going to be adapting to the rules and trying to implement all of these rules while also tackling the great feat of me researching and implementing what I'm learning about Greyhawk and how I want to use Greyhawk. So I wanted to talk about those things. How am I using Greyhawk? Because there are a few different ways that you can approach it, depending on exactly what resources you're wanting to use to concoct your campaign for Greyhawk. So I'm going to share what those are. So the first one that I'm using, and some people told me that I really should start with the most basic of basics, the one that's only like 32 pages. I can't even remember what it's called, but you have the World of Greyhawk fantasy campaign book. Um, for me, I went with the one that has 3 books. So this is a PDF you can get from Drive Through RPG for like $10, and that's what I did. It comes with 3 books in it, 3 different PDFs, and you have book 1, which is general history, major civilizations, trade details, populations, deities, racial characteristics, and dress. There's just a ton of information in this thing. It is quite a few pages. As far as you get all kinds of heraldry and stuff, and yes, I printed it out because I like to have stuff in print. You get all kinds of heraldry and stuff. You get just a brief history of the world and how it got to be the way that it is. But one of the things that I really appreciate is there's a lot of attention to detail on very specific things that I find very interesting, things that I probably wouldn't have worried about so much myself. For instance, what kind of trees do you find in which different areas of the world, and what are those trees really good for? Something that, it should be something that's kind of apparent that would be something that could have a profound effect on things, but at the same time, it's very easy to leave behind. In this case, it's detailed to a very pleasing degree. It's only a few pages as far as that goes. And it also talks about, what kind of fruits and things like that you would get from these trees. And there's just a lot of really great details. You have probably the most pivotal information for me is really the populations, the deities, the deities in particular of Greyhawk are really cool. So I mean, you have this large list of greater, lesser, and demigods, basically, and you have more deep detail on a select few of them. So there are several of them that all you get really is a name and a general disposition and what domain they cover, more or less. But for the ones that do have detail, they're exquisite, guys. Like I find myself just incredibly in love with a lot of these deities. One of them in particular that I love is the goddess of fate. The name is escaping me at the moment, and I'm gonna have to apologize for that. But the thing about of course I'm going to beat on my microphone. The thing that I appreciate about this deity is the fact that really reading about her, you understand that she could end you. She could end you just so easily. And at the same time, I'm constantly thinking about if my PCs were to ever run across this deity, what exactly could they be interested in trying to do with this deity, or what would they be seeking from her? She, being the goddess of fate, is very capricious in a lot of ways, and it basically says that people don't really appeal to her unless things are incredibly, incredibly dire. And the kinds of things that she's capable of doing, the way that it describes how she can basically connect you to any time or place through these means of using her web, that it's just incredibly evocative, and it just makes me think of all the stuff that could happen. And what happens if her spindle is taken away from her? There's just a lot of really cool details here. So I love the details of the deities. It's really beautiful. I'm really looking forward to incorporating that. I often don't really care about deities in a lot of these settings because they tend to feel kind of derivative. And some people may say that these are really derivative. Maybe I'm an ignorant slut, and these are really derivative. But I got a lot of gears turning whenever I was reading these things. So I really appreciated that. The fact that you have all of these different civilizations keyed out with basically, how big of a population do they have? What is the population primarily comprised of? Are there humanoids? Basically, is usually the thing that's going to ask. What kind of demi-humans live there? You'll be able to find out what is the general alignment of this area, so that way you can work off of that. You'll get a little bit of history about what's going on. It's not so intense that you feel like you need to. I mean, each entry for these enormous cities it's less than a page. Yeah, I don't think that any of them take up more than a page. I don't think that any of them really take up more than half a page. So they're nothing really too extensive, but at the same time, it's a great primer. It's a great starting point for you to blossom out of. It's this great position of just enough detail that I can work off something that I really like. The racial characteristics, that being something that is pretty much exclusive to humans because it is a humanocentric setting. There is a greater focus on where these different ethnic strains of humans, pan out, and what are their modes of dress, and what characteristics do they tend to have, and how do people of different nations tend to be comprised of these different, heritages, basically. There are a lot of really cool details with that I appreciate. There is a strong focus on the world that you're going to be playing in, and that outside of that, there's a lot of open space that you don't really know what exactly is out there. And I'm perfectly happy with that. If there was a great deal of time and energy expended in trying to detail things outside the flanes or however you want to pronounce it, I don't know how it's supposed to be pronounced, but then I feel like it would get bogged down. It would be too cumbersome, and there would be the desire in my brain to really want to know those things, so that way the players can key off of it. But instead, it's left kind of open, and so because of that, I'm like, well, I really need to only focus on the immediate area, and then in a tangential way, some of the surrounding area. But really, once you're getting outside the flanes, it's not really my problem. It's a huge, huge, huge area. And, by the time that they're working to that point, then hopefully they can tell me what they're intent on, exploring. And then I can take some time to flesh that out more, basically. So there is a great bit of detail on different areas that are not just civilizations, like you have different woods. What are some things that are out there in this wood or that wood? What are some things that are out in this hill area? This canyon, this desert. And, again, nothing is really more than half a page or anything like that. So incredibly evocative and useful, but not too cumbersome. So that's really the biggest thing that book one gives me that I really appreciate. So book two is really the way that I kind of conceive of it is the details that you need to run Greyhawk as a hex crawl. So the reason I say that is that this is going to get into some deeper procedural minutia. So basically, how do you tell what the weather is for a given day? How do you tell, like, what are some random encounters for people that are traveling within Verbobank, sorry. I was trying to combine names, but yeah, within the region of Verbobank. What if they're traveling in, you know, some general pond marsh type area kind of thing? You know, there's all of these things that are more particular to Greyhawk than just, you know, generic fantasy thing. So basically, you know, you have a 50% chance of rolling off of these more specific charts that often have more encounters with humans, because it is a humanocentric world, you know, versus the general chart that you're going to use 50% of the time that may have encounters that are just off of your random wilderness encounter charts for AD&D. So I really appreciate that that's provided. The weather stuff is really useful. As far as how much I'm going to actually use it, I think I'm really going to be using it more as guidelines than anything else. There's a lot of really cool information in there. Something I really appreciated, because I'm using the modules, and I'll get to that in a minute, because I'm using the modules to help fill in certain gaps, and also because I would like to have the opportunity to present these as places that can be encountered if the players choose to. One of the things that the book 2 does do is it includes, well, if you're looking for Hamlet, you're going to find it over in this hex right here, roughly. It's in this general area. And then if you look over here, you know, this is where you're going to find the where Against the Giants takes place. You know, it doesn't cover all of them, you know, all of the TSR modules by any means, but it covers quite a few of them so that you can help kind of get your bearings. So that is something that's really appreciated. The fact that they have, you know, the rulers of the nations, I mean, those are something that are talked about in the first book. You know, it'll say that there's the Archbishop of Veluca. And then so you are, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'm still working on this. I'm still researching. So give me a break. But anyway, so you have this Archbishop. Well, you know, so yeah, you have this Archbishop, but at the same time, you can go to book 2 and then you can see, oh, the Archbishop is like a level 16 or 17 cleric. You know, what does that say about the world? That somebody that powerful is the one who's the head of a nation. And then you look at all of the other people that are rulers of other nations, and it's like, yeah, whenever you're looking at people in charge of places, they're pretty tough. And so that tells you that the world is full of very tough people in charge. And that kind of makes you think that, you know, your big bad PCs are really not as big bad as you might think they are for a long time. They really have to work at it to get to the point where, you know, they can throw their weight around and be taken too seriously, which is completely counter to how I used to run my games. I used to run my games en contraire, where basically the humans were really not the biggest threat. Not really, none of the demi-humans were even that big of a threat, except in large numbers. The thing that you needed to worry about were primarily the monsters. You know, those were the kind of games that I tended to run. In this world, you know, there are a lot of very fearsome people out there. And that's something that the modules reflect too, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But that's book 2. I really like book 2. It really rounded out what I felt like I needed to know. And then book 3 is really just the big old hex maps. And I printed them out. This is one of them. So there's 2 pages. And, you know, like, you can't see it too well, and I apologize for that. My camera is not focusing as well as it could. But basically, the biggest problem that I've had with this is I need a means to print this on a very large type of medium. And that's a problem that I'm coming across. I think what I'm probably going to have to do is just, you know, print little sections, just tons and tons of little sections, get a giant ass poster board, and then, you know, cut and paste these things onto the poster board. So that way I have these big old hexes. And then I haven't quite figured this out yet. I know that digitally I'm probably going to have more luck, but at the same time, my computer's a piece of shit. And whenever I try to use a lot of these resources, it's, you know, whenever I have Google Docs open and I have this PDF and that PDF, and then I've got this and that and that and that, then, you know, it's really starts slowing down. I'm afraid if I start pulling in a lot of graphic intensive stuff going on with me throwing text on things. It's going to really bog things down. So I'm trying to get that sorted out. That's part of it. But basically, the good thing to know is that there is this hex map that is included in that, again, $9.99 PDF. That is quite useful. And if you have the means to print it out in a reasonable size, then you can do a hell of a lot with it. It is very, very, very cool. I like hex maps. If I wasn't that concerned about using a hex map, I have another tool to talk about, which I still am using too. I'm just using it not in that direct of a manner. But anyway, so the next tools that I'm using are modules. So basically, for those who don't know, I'm starting with 2 groups. This is because of the fact that in AD&D, if you have paladins and you also have assassins, then you've also got problems. Because paladins are supposed to be lawful good, and they're not supposed to tolerate people that are not good or lawful. So that puts them kind of at odds with the people that have to be evil by necessity in order to play their class. I also just happen to have a lot of interested players at the moment, so I decided to split the group in 2, and I said, if you are a paladin, you're in group A. If you are an assassin, you're in group B. If you're a ranger, you're in group A. So that way you got your good group and you got your neutral to possibly evil-leaning group. So that way we can have a little bit of edgelord fun too. That's what we're going to get all into. Group A, and I've told them this. I said, if you've already experienced this, if you already know this, you need to be in Group B. I told them this. I said, you're starting in Hamlet. Hamlet, incredibly well known. A lot of people know it and love it. You've got, of course, this beautiful, beautiful book here that you can use for Hamlet. And oh my God, I love it. I love this thing so much. It's so nice being able to buy this, and it's like it doesn't cost that much, and then I can just feel completely guilt-free, penciling all over this motherfucker. But anyway, yeah. So you got this whole thing, T1 through 4, that I can use, and it's like here's a starting area. Hamlet in particular is really, really good for this. Really, really good. I'm also using A0 through 4 for Group B. Now, before you start commenting and saying, Aaron, that is a whole bunch of different areas. It's not just one area. I know that. I know that is the case. I'm using A0. So I'll clarify. I'm using A0. A1 through 4 exist in the world and can be partaken, basically. And it's really the same thing with Temple of Elemental Evil as well. I don't expect them to do the Temple of Elemental Evil. What I'm doing is I'm giving them a starter town, and I'm saying, if you've done the Moat House before, then you should be in Group B, because the Moat House is what we're starting with. This is something that a lot of times when people talk about open world sandbox games, one of the things that they say is that people don't really know what they're supposed to be doing, and that because of that, it's incoherent. It doesn't really have any sticking point, and it doesn't have any meaning. So one of the things that, I feel like is an important way to start a game. Not the only way to do it, but I think an important way to start a game is to start with a bang and not a whimper. So with that, basically, my whole thought process is they're going to start with a starting area. And not only am I giving them the starting area as presented in T1, but I'm also giving them some motivations that are going to point them in the direction of the Moat House. You've all agreed that you're going to go do the Moat House already. We don't have to worry about that going in. So that way, the first thing that you can take your time doing is seeing if your character survives their first adventure. Seeing how your characters operate together, focusing on what are the actions that I'm going to be doing right now. And then you can take a little bit of time while that's working on to think about, okay, now what does this say about my character and their motivations and what kinds of things they're interested in and all that kind of stuff. We can worry about that after we get one adventure under our belt. So to me, that is a really good way to start. And so I'm just telling them flat out, I'm saying, look, you are going to start with this adventure. That part is not debatable. And the reason that I want to highlight that is because after that adventure is done, I have no fucking clue what you're going to do. I have rumor tables that I'm using that are going to give you different ideas of where you could go off and do things. To me, that is classic sandbox adventuring. Whenever I'm going to toss these rumors out there, you're going to tell me which ones are interesting to you. And we're going to make the stretches into beginning, heading down those rumor mills and seeing what shakes from those trees. And then, basically, if we get to a point that I haven't prepared enough of it yet in order to run it, stop the session right there, conclude with whatever downtime stuff we need to get handled or whatever. And then by the next time that we meet up, then I have everything ready to go. And then the cycle repeats, basically. I get the prep done before the session starts. We do the session. I kind of figure out what you're wanting to do for the next session, and then I get that prep ready. And ultimately, the whole time, with this cycle, you're getting to decide what is it that you want to do. I'm not telling you this is the only thing to deal with. And this is something that I feel like is it's an endemic problem that a lot of DMs seem to have, or at least that I've experienced a lot, is they will only present one path before you. And that's all that you ever really get to interact with. And so, while they may be able to say, well, I don't force you to do anything, there's really no context for me to have any other decisions whatsoever. Like I haven't immersed myself into the world because I've been strung along on this very particular walkway that you've had us on, kind of thing. I hate that. If I could start off a game in an incredibly competent manner with the players deciding from the very get-go exactly what they're going to be doing, I would do that. But truly, I don't want the first session to be a whole lot of awkward conversations about the players trying to figure out like what the voice of their character is, what the mind of their character is, and what the world is going on, all at once. I would prefer for them to get a little bit of information as they're going and developing those things as they're playing. And then after that first adventure's under their belt, then they can be like, okay, now I have some context. I have some things to work off of. And, I have a better idea of what matters to my character and how we can get there. So that is really what I'm using that for. So basically, I've got T1. What I could do is I could use it exactly as it's written. But the problem is that really doesn't exist. So, there is never a point really where you can say, I didn't invent anything. I didn't add anything. I didn't change anything. You really can't do that because the players have a mind of their own. They want to go and investigate things. They want to go check out this thing. They want to go check out that thing. They don't know everything that's printed in the book, hopefully, which means that they're not going to know where the boundaries are, so you're going to have to come up with stuff. It's inevitable. So taking that into consideration, I also feel like it's not that bad for me to say, well, Gygax really didn't include a particularly great starting motivation to go into the moat house, so I'm going to provide them with one. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And so for me to do that, I'm tweaking some of the NPCs a little bit. But here's the thing I love about Hamlet is that the NPCs, as written, have some very, very awesome ways that they can deal with the party. And I'm keeping that for damn sure. There are a lot of things in these starter towns that I think are really important to have. So the thing is, Hamlet and Dark Shelf being the A0 town, which that one doesn't have any information really at all about what exactly is in the town. That is focusing entirely on the dungeon delve. So that one is going to be primarily my own fabrication as far as everything that they're going to deal with within the town. But what you have is, in Hamlet, you have a map with all of these different houses, and you have who lives in those houses. A lot of them don't have names. They're just like, what is their occupation, basically? And what are their possessions, and what kind of deity do they serve? For a lot of them, they serve the same deity, which is basically the old ways, So they're the druidic type folk. And then you have some NPCs that are classed NPCs with levels, and they are hireable. Here's the conditions under which they're hireable, and here's what they want from you. And here are the situations that they might betray you or something like that. And here are their possessions. And there's just a lot of really cool information for how that works. Now, what's really useful to me about that is how well that corresponds, almost as well as I would like it to correspond with the training rules in AD&D. So for those who don't know, in AD&D, if you got your XP up to the next, up to you're ready for the next level, you still need a trainer unless you did a phenomenal job role-playing your character. So unless I was just some completely pushover simp for my players that's going to be like, oh, y'all are fine. Y'all did great. You don't need a trainer. You demonstrated that you role-play your character perfectly. So, you don't need a trainer. And it's only going to take you 1 week to train. So isn't that great? That's great, right? It's not going to cost you that much money. Awesome. Yeah, so because that's not who I am, if there's a pretty good chance that they are going to need to have a trainer. And because of that, they need to have somebody nearby, hopefully, that is free to train and is the right class and level to be able to train them. So because of that, I kind of need there to be almost one of everything for the most part. For this to be viable, I need there to be just about one of everything. And those things are kind of covered in some capacity in the area. You have a magic user, you have a thief, you have several fighters, you've got some rangers, although the rangers are not exactly outward about the fact that they are rangers. You've got you got clerics. The whole question of clerics gets a little bit murky whenever you're talking about clerics that are belonging to different deities. Are they going to train you, with you belonging to a different deity and all that kind of stuff? I'm going to say as long as you're not like opposing an alignment, probably. Yeah. They'll probably be cool with, a little bit of cooperation because, law, guys, law, good, law or good, that kind of thing. Go team. But that's a consideration that you really have to think about. The hireable NPCs is an incredibly important facet to me, and just the fact that you do have with Hamlet, you have here's who the village elder is, but here's the council. These are all these influential people in the village, and so then you can take that and you can work off of that. And then it's like, okay, well, here's the druid of the town, incredibly influential person. Here's what he's tasked with. And then here are these people that are currently staying in the inn. This is the kind of stuff that they are typically up to. It's just there's great information there for me to have concepts of random encounters within the village that that the players might happen upon, especially if they're deciding we're going to go to the inn today. Well, what are you going to see? You're probably going to see this guy drinking because he's drinking most of the time. And here's what he's going to be interested in talking to you about, and all that kind of stuff. So that's where the rumor tables come in. So that is really what I'm going to be doing there. So with Hamlet, incredibly easy. Most of the work is already done. It's a great example for me to just fill in some blanks and then do the same, replicate the thing with Dark Shelf. So with Dark Shelf, like I said, that one, there's really not a whole lot of detail about what's in the town. There's just, you got a person in charge. You got a problem that they want you to deal with. So that one does come with a very direct motivation. That one actually is that part's already done. But you also don't really have a whole lot else. Really, the dungeon is the main feature there. So you do, but boy, is it a dungeon. It is a cool dungeon. I really do like it. So if anybody wants a recommendation, A0 is a good one. So in any case, filling in those blanks, same thing, rumor tables, so that there are other things for them to get up into after they have finished with whatever they're doing. And that's assuming that they even finish. Really, I just want them to be busy for one session. If they're busy for one session and they say, actually, fuck T1, fuck A0, then that's fine. I don't really have a problem with that. I just need them to have something to do for the first session where they all agree, we're going to go do this thing, basically. So honestly, though, I think that they'll probably stick with it because I think that they are really cool adventures. But in any case, so that is where I'm starting out, and then from there, I have another tool at my disposal. So there is a cartographer for Greyhawk called Anna B. Meyer. You should go check her out. So I mean, everybody talks about Darlene's maps, and from what I understand, these hex maps are Darlene's maps, and they're solid. They're absolutely 100% solid. But here's the thing about the Anna B. Meyer Greyhawk maps is that they are incredibly detailed, incredibly, to the point that I really don't have to do a whole lot of like arbitrary rule building if I don't want to. I can say, okay, here's Hamlet. What villages are nearby? And there are some that don't have names. That's fine. I still have to put a name there. But you know what? I know that there's a little village there. I know that it's comprised primarily of gnomes. I know that it's a population of between this amount and that amount. I know that it is fortified or not fortified. All that stuff is there. I know like the rough geographical terrain because it's actually got some detail there. So I've got some topographical features. I can suss out very clearly, and all of that kind of stuff. There's just a ton of detail in these maps that I can take or leave, and so I can use that and fill it in on my hex one. And that way, so I can be like, well, I can use this little tiny tidbit of information that I pulled off from the World of Greyhawk fantasy campaign folio thing, and I can derive from that oh, there must be some gnomes over in this area, and here's kind of what they've got going on. And then so I can say, oh, well, look on Anna B. Meyer's map, and look, there's a town of gnomes up there. So in my rumor chart, I'm going to be referring back to that town that somebody passed through. Now I know roughly what hex it's in, and I can say, how many people live there and all that kind of stuff. And I can add a little bit more detail for the topographical features and all that kind of stuff. So really, I'm using it primarily as a guideline rather than an explicit, this is the map, because of the fact that as far as I've been able to tell, I can't get hexes for it. If I can get hexes for it, this might change very quickly, honestly. But that is currently what I'm looking at. And then the task for me is to do kind of one of the things that Gary suggests in the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is to take each individual hex and say, okay, well, what layers here? What layers here? What layers here? What layers here? And then, just plot those out. So that way I can have hex-specific random encounter charts that I can use. And that way, whenever they encounter a griffin and, it's flying around, and then they say, well, we want to follow it to its, see where it goes. We're going to follow it and see where it goes. Then I can have an idea. Okay, well, yeah, this is something that layers here, or does it layer in another area? Was this something that was pulled up from an adjacent area? If so, then maybe there's something that scared it off. I can do all that kinds of stuff. And whenever they decide they want to build a stronghold and they need to clear out the area of the real bad shit, then I'm not just pulling up stuff off of the big random encounter chart. Instead, I'm like, well, these are the things that live here. So if you can manage to find them and dispatch these things, then your section's clear. You can start clearing out the area and developing a perimeter, and have your people keep this area clear of monsters. People might want to live there, and then you'll be able to pull in some money from these people through a trade that you're going to pull in. And all these kinds of things start opening up as possibilities. And plus, I can have a little bit more of a say-so on what exactly they're probably going to encounter whenever they're traveling these hexes in the wilderness. Because let's be perfectly honest, if you just left the village of Hamlet, I don't think it should be incredibly likely that you encounter a dragon or something like that, or something really, really powerful. The further away you are from civilization, the greater the danger should be. That's kind of an old maxim for the West Marches and things like that. And I feel like that's something worth replicating. So, the deeper off into crazy town you get, the more danger you're going to encounter. And that's really what I want to replicate. So because of that, I actually need to take the time to populate these hexes and be like, yeah, there's something here that layers here. Here's a lost shrine. So, and all that kind of stuff. So that way we can get into the hex crawl if that's something that we want to do, and make it something really meaningful. So that's my game. That's what I'm working on right now. We had people roll up characters. We used method 1, which is the 46 6 times, arrange as drop the lowest, arrange the stats in the way that you choose. Gary says in there that really every character should be above, like, extraordinary in at least 2 things, basically. So 15 or higher in at least 2 stats. And I basically said that. So if you rolled and you ended up not having at least 2 15s, then re-roll the whole set, basically. Beyond that, I mean, we're using as much as I can muster. So we're using the stat restrictions based on race. We're using age modifiers. So all of these young strapping lads, they're getting a boost to their strength and things like that. Once they get to a certain age, then they're going to start taking dips in strength and boost to wisdom and intelligence and all that kind of stuff. We're using weapon versus armor adjustments. We'll see how that goes. I'm really interested to see how it goes. I'm prepared to be referencing charts like mad anytime that they fight up against really anytime that anybody uses a weapon against an armor type, basically. So I was about to say it's pretty much just me when they're encountering other humans, but when those things attack them whenever a goblin attacks them with a dagger, then if they're using heavy armor, then it's not going to be as effective. So I'm going to be trying to use all that stuff, and we're going to see how it goes. I feel for my players, because they're going to have a lot to put up with. My BX ass is going to be working with a lot of things that I've never had to work with before from this side of the GM screen. So it's going to be interesting. I'm really excited about it. Whenever the sessions happen, I'm going to do campaign diaries. I'm going to actually also do some videos going over the Deities of Greyhawk, because, again, I feel like they are really, really awesome. I haven't decided if I'm going to present them for player digestion or for DM digestion, because there are some things that, honestly, the players shouldn't really be thinking about, but some things that the players should be thinking about. I really don't know if I want to include all of that. If I want to include the stuff that they shouldn't be thinking about, how much am I doing this for GMs and how much am I doing this for players, basically, is the question. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Greyhawk is cool, guys. It's really cool. I'm really looking forward to doing it. And I hope that we have a great game. If anybody is interested in joining, it is kind of late in the game, but at the same time, I assume that there will be some people that will probably drop out as things go along. So having a healthy stream of potential reserve players may be the best thing for me to do. So join the Discord and be available. We're going to be playing on Monday nights from 6:30 to 10 Central Time. And we're playing every other week. So starting next Monday is Group A, and then the Monday after that is Group B. We flip-floppy, basically. So we're gonna do that. Yeah, that's the video. I hope y'all enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to hearing what y'all have to say. So peace out.